So, first part of our program this morning is let's talk. I don't see any questions, so I'm prepared. I was reading the other day, and I hope, I'm going to read slowly so that you can absorb what I'm reading, and then if you have any feedback or questions from the webinar, please feel free to ask and I'll try to answer. This is a writing and a reading by Torquem Serdarian, in which he was talking about the law of groups. And I'd like to read a little bit of what he has said. He said, the law of groups is to have a body that millions of cells collect and are going to live together, whether they like it or not. If the feet say, I do not want it, go to hell, the feet die and the body suffers. He says group law is the formation of forms. A group is a form, a nation is a form. He says the step that you can do to save yourself from falling under temptation is increasing in absolute love. And this is why I picked this reading this morning, is because last Sunday we talked about an instruction that Helena Rourke had said in one of her letters to one of her students, where she said how important it is that we protect our heart. So I felt like this fell right into, that conversation. The second step is that you can do to save yourself from falling under temptation is increasing in absolute love. Let them hurt you. Let them gossip about you, slander you, do anything they want. But increase your love, because it is a challenge for you to test if you have love. Christ said, what is the profit of man who loves somebody who loves him? The profit starts, P-R-O-F-I-T. Christ, P-R-O-P-H-E-D. The profit starts when you love somebody who does not like you. And he says this is discipleship. He goes on to say, of course, I see many, many failures in the groups, not only in his group, but in many groups. You can investigate and see that under all problems, under slander and revenge, he says that, see that under all problems, under slander and revenge and treason and separatism is the lack of love. Really, I'm telling you very sincerely, discipleship cannot proceed without increasing your love. So how is love going to manifest, he asks. Well, he says, that I'm going to leave for you to find out. How are you going to demonstrate love toward each other? Love to the servant of this group? I am not saying the master. How much of you are going to increase your love for each other and to the core, so that you always have a protective shield in you? Love is a shield. If a woman loves you, if a man loves you, nobody can penetrate between you. This is a shield. But if there is no love between you, dark forces can penetrate. They are just ready to attack you. You can find this in your family life, in your group life. If we love each other more, we will be invincible. Try to think about it. Do you want me to go on? Yeah. Okay. The next step, he says he is talking about in this book, he's talking about the Tibetan master. The next step he is talking about in this book is that a probationary disciple comes in contact with his soul. This is a very important announcement because the Tibetan master says that nobody comes in contact with his master before he contacts his capital S soul. That is why I wrote many, many articles against these psychics and prophets, P-R-O, and mediums who say, we are talking every day with the master. But before you talk to the masters, you will be able to present the treasures that are within you. If you are poor mentally, emotionally, physically, with your deeds, you cannot come in contact with the master. You must be somebody to be in contact with the master. First, you are going to contact your capital S soul. Strangely enough, to contact your soul means two things. You can see this in people. Deeper humility starts to follow from your actions and words and thoughts. You always want to hide. You become so humble. Now, I couldn't help but think about the few photographs of Helena Rourke, who is standing underneath an umbrella and always behind someone, so you could just hardly see her. So let me repeat this. Deeper humility starts to follow from your actions, words, and thoughts. You always want to hide. You become so humble. This is the first sign. That is why a great thinker says that if pride and vanity increase, they are the forerunner of your defeat. Isn't that interesting? So he goes on to talk about the probationary path and group formation and how to start an ashram. So this is just a little snippet from his writing. So are there any questions? I don't see any from the webinar. Today's talk is titled Christ and Avatars. Some of the excerpts from today's Sunday talk is from the book called Teachings of Christ, Volume 2. When we think about Christ, most people will think about the past. But Christ is active. Christ is here with us. He said, I have never left you, and I will never leave you. But we need to refine ourselves to come in contact with him. Christ is working through the 7 fields of human endeavor. He also told us that if 2 others are gathered together in his name, he is there with us. When Jesus was here, he was a 6th ray master. Christ, the head of hierarchy, expressed himself through Jesus. But now humanity is waiting for the reappearance of the Christ. What does this mean? If he never left. If he never left, how can he reappear? As life advances, as you and I advance, as humanity advances, so does Christ advance. So how is this going to occur? How will we know it? He's talking about the reappearance of the Christ. How will we know it? We are told that the avatar of synthesis is coming to us from outside the solar system. This avatar of synthesis is going to express himself through Christ, the head of hierarchy, just like Christ expressed himself through Jesus. Avatars are divine. They come to us from outside the solar system. All avatars come to us from outside the solar system. For example, Sandakamara, also known as the Ancient of Days and the Lord of the World, he came to us from the Venus scheme. Sandakamara is a physical incarnation of the planetary logos. The lower self of the planetary logos. It's kind of hard to think about the planetary logos having a lower self. But that's the way it is. As above, so below. So, Sanakamara is the physical incarnation of the planetary logos and thus the lower self. The planetary logos is the higher self. In other words, Sanakamara is the representative of the planetary logos. Sanakamara is the expression of his will within humanity, the personification of his will and the plan. These avatars are sent to us by the headquarters of avatars that decides what to do in any given situation. They decide what to do, whom to send where. So the headquarters of avatars decided to send the avatar synthesis. And it is he who is going to express himself through Christ, the head of hierarchy. It will be up to hierarchy to recognize the avatar synthesis, and up to us, up to humanity to recognize the reappearance. Can you just imagine? Humanity right now is so immersed in the critical nature of one's mind and so exclusive in its thinking. Imagine how difficult this is going to be for humanity to recognize the reappearance. So that's just something we can ponder. So it is not Jesus, but the Christ who is coming. And the avatar synthesis is going to express through Christ. Do you want me to repeat that? It is not Jesus, but the Christ who is coming. The Christ who is coming, and the avatar synthesis is going to express through Christ. The avatar synthesis can overshadow and initiate and others if necessary. The Ageless Wisdom specifically indicated that toward the end of last century and on into this century, there would be seen an increased number of senior disciples and initiates becoming overshadowed. This indicates that the projected energies of the avatar of synthesis this is important to assimilate what I'm saying here. The projected energies of the projected energies, that's my point. The projected energies of the avatar synthesis will overshadow certain members, those who have an illumined consciousness from his ashram, the ashram of synthesis. And the reason I'm emphasizing this is that White Mountain, for this last 12 months, we've had a group project where some of us, about 20 of us, have been studying the avatar of synthesis. And so this is a little different twist than what some of you have been studying and writing about. So I just wanted to make sure that you all are hearing this. The projected energies. Okay, so why overshadow? And the answer is in preparation for the upcoming world changes. We are told that cosmic avatars cannot descend below the cosmic mental plane, but they can project an image of themselves into the mental plane, the higher mental plane of the cosmic physical plane. So what does this mean to us, to you and me? This is that it is very important that we refine our consciousness. Refine our consciousness to such a degree so that we can contact his reflection on the higher mental plane. That we work hard on ourselves to eradicate our glamours and illusions. That we construct the bridge between the lower and higher mind. We must progress in the energies of the Christ, the ashram of the Christ, in order to be in contact, in order to recognize him. The ashram of the Christ is hierarchy. Now, maybe in one life we were in contact with him. He was going at 5 miles per hour then, and we were going at 5 miles per hour. But now the Christ is going at 1,000 miles per hour, and we have only advanced to 10 miles per hour. So we cannot contact him now, not until we refine our consciousness. This is how we're going to keep the necessary speed. So we are going to refine our body, our emotions, our mind. After he resurrected, he came many times. We are told that for 11 years, until the disciples passed away, he was with them every day. After that, he came and had interviews with many saints. For example, St. Francis of Assisi. He was praying when suddenly the Christ said, "My dear, you are going to build my church." The voice came from Christ's mouth. So, St. Francis started to do it. He was a very thin man, St. Francis was. He was a very thin man who died young because he did his job and then passed away. But after hundreds of years, still, we are remembering him. One contact is enough. This is why we say that your intelligence, your power, your position, your education does not make any difference. You can be destroyed by your own intellect, by your own knowledge, by your own positions, and still dump yourself into the deep hole, except if you come in contact with him. There was an Armenian saint in the 10th or 11th century who used to talk with Christ. He was called Gregory of Neri, more commonly known as Nerigatsi. He lived from 951 to 1003 and is a canonized saint. For Nerigatsi, people's absolute goal in life was to reach God and to reach wherever human nature would unite with their godly nature, thus erasing the differences between God and man. As a result, the difficulties of the earthly life would disappear. According to Nerigatsi, mankind's assimilation with God is possible, not by logic, but by feelings. Numerous miracles and traditions have been attributed to this saint, and perhaps that is why he was referred to as the watchful angel in human form. Let me spell his name. Remember, it was Gregory of Neri, and Neri is spelled N-A-R-E-K. N-A-R-E-K. And Nerigatsi is N-A-R-E-G-A-T-S-I. I know you're all going to run to the internet, Wikipedia, and learn more about this man. And it is there. A saint was walking in the street, and he saw a wounded man lying in the street. His disciples said, "He is already dying." The saint said, "No, I cannot leave that man there." And like Mother Teresa, he said, "I can't leave that man there. Let me take him." So they put him on the saint's back. Suddenly, while they were walking, they realized that the wounded man was no longer on the saint's back. He was walking beside the saint. The saint looked at him and said, "Oh, it is my Lord." Yes. He was a leader of the well-developed school of Armenian mysticism at Narve Monastery. At the request of his brethren, he set out to find an answer to an imponderable question. What can one offer to God, our Creator, who already has everything and knows everything better than we could ever express it? To this question posed by the prophets, the psalmists, the apostles, and saints, he gives a humble answer. The size, S-I-G-H-S, the size of the heart, expressed in, that's his answer, the size of the heart, expressed in the Book of Prayer, also called the Book of Lamentations. For Naragazzi, his followers, their absolute goal in life should be to reach to God and to reach wherever human nature would unite with godly nature, thus erasing the differences between God and man. As a result, the difficulties of earthly life would disappear. According to him, mankind's assimilation with God is possible, not by logic, but by feelings. So here's another story. There is a Hindu Pakistani, Sadhu Singh. One night he said, "I really want to know the truth, whether Christ exists or not. If he exists, everything will change in my life. If he doesn't exist, then why all these churches and things?" So he said, Christ, I am talking to you. I know that you are present. If by dawn you do not appear to me, I am going to throw myself under the locomotive engine. So he is waiting. And just before dawn, suddenly a light came into his room, and he said, "Do you believe now?" Sadhu Singh said, "Because I was a Sikh who became Christian, they put me in the skin of a big animal. They had tied him in the skin and left him in the sun. And what happens? The skin starts to dry and slowly cuts your bones and everything. So," he said, "I was waiting. Slowly, slowly, the skin became so tight, I didn't know what to do. I said, 'My Lord, where are you?' Then his voice came. He said, 'Just jump out.'" He said, "How can I jump out? I'm tied." He said again, "Just jump out." So I immediately obeyed, and the skin opened, and I went out. We know that a great sage saw him. The Tibetan master, we are told, saw him and conversed with him. There are many others. There are many examples like this, and you can find them if you do some research. So one of the chapters in the second volume of this book tells us to first develop a faith, not logic and reasoning. Faith is contact with Christ. So he's giving us a definition here of faith. Faith is a contact with Christ and the ability to live by the rules of Christ. Faith is also the absence of doubt. Here's another of his activities. The Tibetan master says about Christ that every sunset he stands under a big pine tree and blesses the world. That is why every sunset is different. So that's a beautiful image, that we can hold in our minds. The chapter gives us 5 principles that Christ is with everybody and every group and church that follows these 5 principles. In other words, if the group, if the church follows these 5 principles, then Christ will be with them. Beauty, goodness, righteousness, joy, and also freedom. These are the 5 principles. Beauty, goodness, righteousness, joy, and freedom. Wherever there is beauty, he is there. Beauty of body, beauty of heart, beauty of mind, beauty of spirit, and beauty of relationship. See, these are words, but really try to assimilate what these words mean. Beauty of body, okay, we know what that is. Beauty of heart, now it's getting a little bit more complicated. It's like, as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. What does that mean? Beauty of mind. And see, it's getting more and more complicated. Beauty of spirit. And beauty of relationship. Wherever there is ugliness, you cannot find him, because light never lives with darkness. He says, test this. Think about something ugly, and you will see how you are poisoning your system. Think about something beautiful, and you will see that you are brighter, beautiful, loving, and people will love you. You become magnetic. For goodness, we must become the embodiment of goodness. That means don't say things that are charged with hatred, with separatism. That's probably even more difficult than not to say things charged with hatred, particularly spiritual people. Truly spiritual people tend not to have hatred in their bones, but separatism is rampant. And of course, don't say things that lead you into treason or malice and slander. So this is not so easy as it seems. You can have $1 million, but your worth is a penny if you do not live by these principles. From a spiritual viewpoint, you are not worth even a penny. Why is this? Because you still have jealousy. You have envy. You have created many messes in people, hurt people, harm people, and yet you call yourself a respectable human being. Goodness is so important. Righteousness is the next one. Righteousness can be understood from different views. One, it means to live in the frequency of your inner divinity. That's one definition of righteousness. It means to live in the frequency of your inner divinity. See, these are definitions that you're not going to read and hear about, in the general sense. So righteousness means to live in the frequency of your inner divinity. It is a substance by which a servant of the hierarchy is built. That's the second view. And the third, it means that you do not deceive others. So a lot to think about, how do you deceive others? And then find your answers. And the fourth is joy. Agni Yoga says that joy is a special wisdom. Joy is a passageway of the spiritual warrior. In Supermundane, verse 14, it says, there are many waiting. Let them learn first about the difficulties of the journey and clearly understand the fight with darkness. Let them not hope to avoid it. The path to joy cannot be easy. Isn't that interesting? See, we don't really understand joy, but the teachings are trying to bring it to light so that we can better realize what joy is. Most of us understand happiness and the lack of happiness, but joy is a higher frequency. The path to joy cannot be easy. And the verse in Supermundane says, there will be joy. We shall speak more about joy, but first let us forge the armor of the Spirit. For only in the acceptance of suffering can the embryo of the joy of wisdom be born. It cannot be achieved without suffering. Only with us is this joy born. And again, that's from verse 14 of Supermundane. And then freedom. Helena Rourke wrote, everybody is preaching various freedoms, but the most opposite schools of thought agree in one thing, that they all are afraid of freedom of thought. Most people speak about freedom of speech, but how many consider freedom of thought? How powerful is this great gift to have? The gift of freedom of thought. Did your parents, your teachers, give you the gift of freedom of thought? Does this gift promote freedom of thought? This is one of the principles of Christ. It is important that as a person, you allow others the freedom of thought. In Letters of Helena Rourke, she wrote, one must firmly understand that all the given orders can never enslave the spirit of a disciple, because there is always left the freedom of individual expression. And we know how endlessly we may refine the quality of the fulfillment of every task. So she's now talking to disciples in this letter. She says, only a slave of yesterday may revolt against an order. Only a petty consciousness is afraid to lose its individuality by fulfilling the plans of his guru. To rely only upon your own accumulations, rejecting all that we can assimilate from the high consciousness of the teacher, means to reject any new accumulations. Individuality is formed from these new assimilations, combined with previous assimilations. She also wrote in another letter, Buddha brought freedom to India by his rejection of the caste system. But by refusing Buddhism, India chose slavery. The theoretical acceptance of the teachings of Buddha and Christ are one thing, but it is an entirely different matter to practice them and to realize them through the heart. The true follower of Christ and Buddha is the one who realizes the single, fundamental, and universal doctrine which is behind them and nourished them. So only such a follower enters the path of evolution. That's the end of that. So it's unquote. If you need help, ask him. It can happen in an instant. Ask him, and you will see where he is, and don't doubt it. Once you doubt, you have short-circuited yourself. Don't doubt. If you doubt, it is gone. If you don't doubt, you have it. There's a well-known story about Peter and Christ. One day, he was in the boat, fishing with some of his disciples, and St. Peter saw him. St. Peter said, "Lord, is it you?" "Yes," Christ said. "Well, if it is really you, let me come and see you." Christ started to walk on the waves. When he started to walk, St. Peter said, "If it is really you, give me orders so that I walk on the waves also." So he walked a little, maybe a quarter of a mile, but suddenly he started to sink. Christ grabbed him and pulled him up and said, "You of little faith, why did you doubt?" So let us keep this story in our mind, and anytime we doubt, we're going to go to the bottom, because doubt short circuits our whole spiritual computer. It is gone. So what is faith? It is the absence of doubt.